A very good afternoon to you, saudara-saudara dan saudari-saudari, ladies and gentlemen, and my lucky fellow residents of Malaysia. As Najib Razak said, Malaysians have spoken very loudly and very clearly. Malaysians, in short, are united together as one people to demand a better life for themselves and a better future for their children. The new Mahathir government should take note about how angrily decisive Malaysians could be. The new government should deliver its promises adequately. Otherwise, 5 years from now, the people might bring back UMNO past coalition, especially if UMNO reforms itself. What do Malaysians want? I think we all know that Malaysians share the same aspirations with other people the world over. The first thing Malaysians want would be that they could enjoy in the near future the same benefits enjoyed by the residents in the developed countries. In short, Malaysians want dynamic economic development that would bring the standard of living closer to the standard of living in the developed world. We want to be able to achieve the standard of living soon, like that in Korea, South Korea, I mean, Taiwan, and Japan, and Singapore, certainly. There's nothing that Singapore has done which you could think of why Malaysia would not be able to achieve. The second thing that Malaysians want is the respect they deserve as human beings. Malaysians want Malaysia to be socially harmonious, socially inclusive, and socially mobile. We certainly want a society that's multicultural and practices gender equality. Third thing Malaysians want is that they want good governance. They want leaders they can truly respect. Malaysians want competent leaders who operate transparently and who are held accountable for the things they do. Because Malaysia wants good governance, they want free and fair elections, a free press, and an independent judiciary with integrity. The fourth thing that Malaysians want is that they would like to leave their children a natural environment that is at least as pristine as the one that they had inherited. However, because Malaysians cannot enjoy clean air unless the Indonesians are also enjoying clean air, we need to promote global cooperation and advances in science, because many of the solutions to environmental protection would have to lie in advances in knowledge which we could then apply. The four items that I identified: economic dynamism, social inclusion and mobility, good governance, and environmental protection, are goals that the people the world over have worked together through the United Nations to formulate as the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This is something that the previous government committed to and which the present government must continue to uphold. I'm pleased to report that Sunway University has played a pioneering role in promoting the practice of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in Malaysia. Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia gave very generously 10 million US to the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network to establish the Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development here. I hope that all of you would accept my invitation to work with the Jeffrey Sachs Center to entrench sustainable development practices in our everyday life. We will be starting a new master's program in sustainable development, which, if we are lucky, would begin either in fall 2018 or the beginning of 2019. Before I go on to the discussion, I must express my regrets that a fundamentally important issue will not be discussed adequately today. The fundamentally important issue that would not be discussed adequately is social inclusiveness. I tried but failed to find someone who can lead our discussions on gender equality. I'm very sorry that I know too few people and I simply ran out of time. I started organizing this 24 hours after the results were in. So I am very grateful that you all have taken the risk to come and attend such a hastily convened group of people. So I ask your forgiveness for my personal failings in unable to convene an adequate discussion on social inclusiveness and particularly gender equality. Finally, I want to convey a concern from the senior management. As you know, after the Bali riots over starvation, over the people who starved, that was in 1973 or 1972, I can't remember. The University Act was passed, no politics on campus. This is something we uphold, largely because we are not going to talk politics today. We're going to talk, the politics was decided on May 9th. Today, the panelists have all agreed that this is not an exercise in triumphalism of criticizing the defeated party. They already have, the electorate has spoken, and they would confine themselves to talking about the future we want and the ways that we can achieve the vision we want. To make sure that this is an objective panel, 2 of the 3 speakers with me are defeated candidates in the election. So they have no stake in the government. So what we do is we'll have the elected person speak last. The first speaker is Wan Saiful Wan. He is a member, he was the Persatu candidate in Perlis. Kedah. Oops. Sorry. Perlis gets swallowed up sometimes. Sorry. And he is a member of the Supreme Council of Persatu and the deputy head of his strategy unit. So Wan Saiful used to run a think tank called Ideas. Now his job to make sure the ideas work. So, Wan Saiful.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I think many of you would know that I'm actually a replacement speaker for, who was it? For Mujahid, Dr. Mujahid, who couldn't make it today. It feels like a parachute candidate all over again. But there we go. So, but firstly about the, let me say firstly, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you to everyone for attending. This is probably the first formal event discussing the outcome of the election. So I'm really honored to be here. Just now, our chairperson here mentioned about the Universities Act. And I just want to highlight the fact that we, in Pakatan Harapan, the new government form is going to be bound by this book. It's called Buku Harapan. The theme is Rebuilding Our Nation, Fulfilling Our Hopes. Rebuilding our nation, fulfilling our hopes. And this is quite a big book, so I'm going to start off by explaining to you how we got to publishing this book, and then I'm going to comment on some of the concerns that people may have, and just express my comments on these promises as well. And just to clarify just now, I did lose in the election. I contested in Pendang in Kedah. That was a tough fight. The victor of that election is PAS. So it's a PAS MP representing Pendang now. And not only that, in my constituency, we lost even the two state seats. So one of the state seats was won by UMNO, another one was won by another PAS candidate. So this is one of the, I guess if you look throughout the country, it must be one of the anomalies in Malaysian election. And I'm sure it will make a very interesting case study of how things are. In fact, my personal interest now is looking at how PAS has performed in this last election. Actually, going beyond the expectations that many people had, even myself. But over the last few days, people keep telling me, Wan Saiful, you're not an analyst anymore. You're now in a political party. So start doing the political work. So the last few days have been quite an interesting few days discussing about the new government formation and talking to people about positions and all that. Completely new experience. But let me come back to the topic about keeping the promises of reform alive in Pakatan Harapan government. This is really important because this is the reason why people voted us in. So my involvement in the manifesto, just as a background, started off last year. Ironically enough, it started off on my birthday last year, on 20th of June last year. I received a visit from Datuk Rais Hussein, who is a head of PPBM strategy unit, and he asked me if I want to help write the manifesto at that time for PPBM. At that time, the stage was still quite fluid in terms of the partnership between the coalitions, and we were not very sure, how things would pan out. So the invitation was for me to help in drafting the manifesto. At that time, I was still at Ideas. So the team at Ideas actually, sat down and started doing some brainstorming. We basically came out with several ideas. But then as things pan out, we realized that this is going to be a very, very much a political document. So Ideas itself pulled out from the process, but I continued my involvement in writing it. I still remember the first draft. The task given was to produce a draft of maybe like 15 to 20 pages for the committee, the manifesto committee, to review it. The manifesto committee consists of very, experienced people and very respected people in the four parties. Datuk Rais himself, YB Sim, YB Ong Kian Meng, and Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad. So my job was to produce a draft, and they would review, edit, comment for further improvement. So on 20th of June last year, the first meeting took place, and then within 2 days after that, a pile of document was delivered to my office, and my task was to produce a short draft. I thought it's going to be, looking at the buku jingga that was used in the last election. That was, the full manifesto was not very long, so I thought my first draft is going to be quite straightforward, 5-6 pages. It turned out to be an 84-page document. Because as soon as you start looking at the problems faced by the country at that time, you realize how big it actually is. And there was a study done called What Malaysians Want. And this is a survey done over the period of the last year and a half or so. It's a survey nationally. And when you go through the list of things that Malaysians were saying as the issues they were concerned about, you realize that, you know, a few pages, 4 or 5 pages is not going to be enough. So my first draft was already about first draft was 84 pages, and then I received comments from all the 4 people on the panel, and that eventually grew to become this document of 194 pages in Malay. So the original document is in Malay. The English translation is a bit smaller at 149 pages. I must admit, this is actually the first time I look at the English version of the manifesto, but we have been using the Malay version as the original document from day one. So if you want to actually refer to the document, I really urge you to look at the Malay version rather than the translated one. So the full, the more accurate document is the Malay version of the manifesto. The document was launched on the 8th of March this year. And my fear about this document was the fact that we didn't have enough time to explain to people fully. So we had to pick the 10 most important things that we want to do in the first 100 days, and then we pick several other issues that we feel, you know, must be mentioned to members of the public to use as campaign material. But the actual depth of the document was never really discussed. So the challenge now is to make sure that whenever we discuss the Pakatan Harapan agenda, there must be people who know properly the content of this document, and not only know the content of the document, but able to make sure that the new administration is made accountable for the promises that we made. The story behind the drafting of the manifesto is quite a long one. I don't want to dwell on that now. Maybe I should, write something on this so that people can understand how serious it was that we took the process. You know, the studies that we referred to, the experts that we called in to give opinion, the ideas that we collected from members of the public, from civil society organizations, from NGOs of various the different sites, people from UMNO as well were giving ideas. So the depth, the robustness of the process was clearly there. And I think if you go through the document, you would see that. You would see also that the document is divided into 6 different parts. The first 5 are the 5 pillars of the manifesto. And then there is an additional chapter. There are 5 additional special promises that we made to the country as a whole. So I'm not going to go through them one by one, but I'm just going to read the pillars to you now. So pillar 1 is about reducing the people's burden. Pillar 2 is about institutional and political reform. Pillar 3 is about sustainable and equitable economic growth. Pillar 4 is about returning Sabah and Sarawak to the status accorded by the Malaysia Agreement 1963. And Pillar 5 is about creating a Malaysia that is inclusive, moderate, and respected globally. Then, in the special promises section, there are special promises for Felda settlers, the Indian community, women, youth, and senior citizens. So it's actually quite comprehensive. If you look at the history of the opposition movement in this country, this, I think, is the first time ever that the opposition front took the process really seriously to produce a document like this. We started off in, I think the team in Pakatan Harapan started off maybe a few weeks before they met me. And you know, the official drafting process started in June, and it went on until end of February, and it was launched only on the 8th of February when everything was done. So that was how tedious, how robust, how serious we took the whole step. And that's why I think it's really important to really understand the book and hold the Pakatan government to account. Sorry, still recovering from election fever. But most people, and especially on the UMNO side, when they look at the manifesto promises of Pakatan Harapan, they try to zoom down at the issues that they feel they can attack Pakatan. And this is why they keep focusing on the issue of GST. What they don't realize is, and what many people don't realize when they discuss the promises made by Pakatan Harapan, is that GST is only promise number one, janji satu out of the 60 promises that we have. So promise number one, abolish GST, is only what, 4 paragraphs out of the 150 pages document. So it's a small part of the whole package that we are offering to the country. And this is also, when I look at the way the debate happened during the course of the campaign, it's a bit disappointing because we never really got the chance to talk about the real reforms that we wanted to bring in. The first pillar, which is about reducing the burden faced by the people, many analysts, many commentators have said that these are very populist ideas. Now, the reality is, if you want to win an election, you do need to be popular. So the popular promises need to be made so that people buy into it. And once you get them to look at your promises seriously, then they should realize also that the second part, third, fourth, and the fifth parts of the manifesto are some serious stuff. You look at the institutional reform promises that we put in the document, it forms 1/3 of the promises that we have. So the promises on the so-called populist promises, the label given by others about our economic promises, many people say it as populist. I may agree and disagree on that one. Issues like GST, for example, many people ask me, Wan Saiful, why are you supporting the abolishment of GST when you were supporting it before? What people tend to miss is, when I was supporting the GST, I was saying that if government wants to tax people, then consumption tax is a better way than income tax. So GST was better than income tax. But if you ask me what I think about taxes generally, people who know me would understand that I love the idea of abolishing any tax at all. So as someone who promotes a liberal market economic system, abolishing taxes is something that I dream about. So when Pakatan Harapan said we must abolish GST, I thought, oh wow, so it is not all about populism. It is also about understanding how there are people on the ground that really need help, and 6% is a big deal to them. Those of us who live in the Klang Valley may not understand this, but I contested in an area called Pandang that many people may not have even visited. I visited places that I thought does not exist anymore in this country. But when you look at them, immediately you would realize that 6% means a lot. 50 cents here and there, it means a lot to them. So this is a big issue for people on the ground. But as soon as you attract the attention of people by promising the economic reforms and the assistance to the masses, issues around institutional reform becomes the key. And institutional reform, there are 19 promises. This is the biggest chapter in the manifesto. That should tell you how damaged the country already is. How damaged the country has become after 60 years of concentration of power, after 60 years of abuse of power, and so on. So my concern at the moment is, when we launched the document, we didn't have enough time to tell not only you, members of the public, but also people within the party. The candidates, I think, were not fully briefed on what the content of the manifesto is. And that is why you do get some variations here and there. See, I'm being diplomatic as a politician now. Some variations here and there when people start to comment on what to do next. And this is expected. I think we should expect this. It is a new government that's being formed. We didn't have enough time to fully brief people, and I hope you do understand how busy campaign schedule is. It starts at 6 a.m., it finishes at 2 a.m. every day for like 3 weeks. So talking about manifesto document, talking about public policy and so on is like number 17 or 18 on the list of priorities when you start the campaign season. But we do now need to make sure that the government as a whole understands what the promises are, it is really important that members of civil society continue to play the role that they or we have played in the past in providing check and balance to the government. I get quite worried and concerned sometimes when I hear the excitement among my civil society friends about how this new government is in and which position they are now going to take as part of government, because they have been fighting for the cause for so long. I think it's really important for people in civil society, people in academia, to make sure that we, as people, Chin Tong is the oldest politician here. I might be number 2, and Mazli is the youngest recruit in terms of 3 of us. So we despite that, we are still politicians. So you will see that even in saying the things that I'm saying today, I'm thinking, how should I present this? Am I saying this in the right way or not? But it is really important that people in civil society, people in academia, continue to put the pressure on us so that we don't deviate from the path that people have given the mandate to us. And there is also another issue when we drafted this manifesto that I hope you understand as well. As members of the opposition, we do not have enough resources, enough time, enough knowledge about how much money is left after all the robberies and theft. So we listed what are the ideal things that we want to do. And then, in my head, when I was drafting the document, it did come into my mind, how are we going to fund this? Luckily, the principle taken by the party is, the first thing we must do is make sure that people who need help are assisted first. And then after that, we find ways on how to fund the whole thing. So for example, many people are saying, how are you going to fund things like free education? How are you going to fund things like abolishing GST? What are you going to replace the income with? So the answer that we gave, I hope, when you read the document, you will get some inklings, some hints from the document that the priority is to help the people who need help first. And in order to find the money to fund them, the principle that we took is we should cut the spending and the excesses that exist within government. So the first person to suffer the repercussion of this is actually the new Prime Minister. Because in this, we said one of the ways by which we're going to fund the things that we promised is by cutting his office's expenditure by 2/3. So he's only going to get 1/3 of what Najib has been enjoying for the last 9 years he's been in office. So Tun Mahathir has a lot of things to consider on his plate. Very high expectation, but not that much money. And so the last point I want to make here is, I really worry about what will happen to UMNO and Barisan Nasional. This might sound ironic because we started off the campaign wanting to decimate them from the face of this earth. But to ensure this new government is kept accountable, there must be a competent opposition. So the functioning of the opposition side is something that must be assured. And if there is funding that's needed, we promise in this manifesto that we will actually fund them. So in Janji 16, promise number 16 of the manifesto, we actually said the leader of the opposition will be granted the status and provisions equivalent to a federal minister, and we will provide funding based on a transparent formula to all members of the Dewan Rakyat so that they can carry out the responsibilities in their respective constituencies and to run their service centers. So the commitment to see a functioning opposition is there. This is really important because if we do not have a functioning opposition, then there's all this risk that we will become another UMNO and Barisan Nasional. Of course, it takes another 60 years to get to that stage. But if we don't have a functioning opposition that will rise up in PRU 15 and GE 15 to challenge us, provide a better narrative than what we can offer, then all sorts of complacency will set in, and this is really dangerous. So I think if we are talking about how to keep the promise of reform, one important element that must exist in making sure that the reform are carried out is we must ensure that the opposition exists. You might notice that I'm using the word opposition. The reason is I'm not sure whether that opposition is going to be UMNO or not. I really am not sure what will happen to them. Looking at how things are at the moment, many are moving very fast to jump side, and our party Bersatu is probably the biggest recipient of people with interest in joining our side from UMNO. But there must be a strong opposition. If we have an extraordinarily strong Pakatan Harapan government, then there might be a cause for concern. So let me stop there so that we can continue with the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wan Saiful, for reminding us that it's important to have a strong opposition, and you wishing that UMNO well. I'd like to add that the difference between popular and populist is the following. Populist is something that benefits you in the short run but hurts you in the long run. It's just like cutting taxes. If you cut taxes, but you also cut spending on education, the cutting of taxes is popular, but the cutting of spending on education is going to screw the country in the long run. So there is a difference. You can be popular, but not populist.